We did. Yeah, Julie's gonna be great.
Yep, yep.
Do you want us to have your book open?
Uh, I'm not sure what you mean.
Ellen sent a chapter from your book on the topic that you're talking about tonight.
Oh, you don't need to have that open.
Okay.
Yes, I did. That was before the weekend. So much has changed.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that is true. Sadly. And the new treasurer just signed on,
Amazingly efficient.
apparently. Hey, Ken.
Hi.
Congrats on your new role.
I feel lighter. I feel lighter.
For those just joining us, there are a couple of folks here who are um, right in the midst of leadership transition in their synagogue, and one is very happy to be concluding their service, and the other is hopefully excited about beginning their service.
Mhm.
So it's 8:01 my time. Like usual, we'll wait until about 3 minutes after the hour. And while we're waiting, if you are able to uh, rename yourself and let us know uh, the congregation that you are a part of, that would be great. It's been really great having strong participation and attendance throughout this course. I don't take that for granted. I'm really, really grateful for everyone's efforts.
Give myself a B because I did miss one session and but I know it's recorded. Are those recordings available yet?
They're all available. I always send them out
Mm.
afterwards, but I will resend because I want to make sure that people are getting it and don't have to dig through their email to look for it.
Okay, would you mind making sure I'm on your list? Because I might not be on the list.
Oh, if that is the case, I apologize. I know we've had a couple of hiccups, Diana, but I feel like your email is so familiar to me from. Hmm.
Well, could just be from because you're our liaison,
Oh,
thriving communities.
that's true.
um, could just be that.
Okay.
But maybe I am on the list. Maybe it's stuck in spam or something.
I am making a note to myself.
Thank you. I missed the last one, and I definitely want to listen in on that.
Okay. Well, um, let's jump in. Welcome back after a couple weeks apart. And um, and welcome to our closing session. Um, I know one of the things that was in the email I sent out uh, just before the weekend was a link to a course evaluation, which is short, and which I really hope that you'll complete. And I'll send it again after this session, and I'll also try to drop it into the chat. Um, and Meanwhile, we're doing great. I mean, we're already up to 16. I bet we're going to get a few more for tonight. What I think I would like to do is actually get started. And what we're going to have a chance to talk about tonight will include um, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, Danielle. I see there's multiple issues with the emails, so that's something you should definitely mention in your course evaluation, because others will be reading them. Um, I want to also welcome Sherry, who I am going to make my co-host, and I thank you for anything that you do from this moment forward, letting people in and whatnot. Um, and Like I said, let me actually go ahead and share my screen. Um, and there we go. There we go. Boy, I feel like we're really falling down on the emails there. That's not good. Well, I will definitely be sending out an email after class. I probably won't do it tonight. I'll probably do it tomorrow. And what I would say is if you don't see an email from me tomorrow by the end of the day tomorrow, um, write me back. I will make sure that you get whatever it is that you need that hasn't come through. I'm a little puzzled by all that, but I believe you, and I want to make it right. So okay, welcome. Tonight, uh, the title of this session is "Where Do We Start? Beginning Your Fundraising Journey." And there's a chapter in the fundraising guide that is called that. It's actually the very last chapter in the guide. But tonight is actually about more than just the content in that chapter. It's also a chance for us to um, talk about, have a little bit of open discussion and to get take a step back to be able to look at the different topics that are included in the fundraising guide. Um, the guide itself is going to be made available to members of Reconstructionist communities probably in May, maybe June, if need be. But Anybody who's taken this class, I'm more than happy to share any draft version of any of the chapters. We've got a web design person who's going to make it all work well as a hub on our website that is password protected. But in the meantime, as you've seen, hopefully, through some of the emails that made their way to you, we've got these chapters in PDF form as drafts, and they also include hyperlinks to really helpful worksheets. So instead of me just describing that, um, let me actually jump into the presentation because the presentation will cover some of that. And I actually want to start tonight with one of my favorite passages in the Talmud. And I love it for a lot of reasons, one of which is that it is so compact that it's really hard to translate into English without using a lot more words than the original. And you can see what it means, right? It's just a proverb basically. If you try to take hold of too much all at once, you end up holding nothing. In in rabbinic Hebrew, this is tafasta merubeh, lo tafasta. Right? And so there's only four words. One of the words is repeated, and this is an idiomatic expression, but hyper literally, what it says is you grab too much, no grabbed. And that's just really, really an important principle that I want to hold up. Not to discourage um, ambitious planning or taking bold risks to do something big, but to remind everyone that as you try to take information that you've learned here or that you've learned elsewhere and implement some greater version of fundraising activity than what you presently have, um, taking time to assess bandwidth and to assess people's capacities and what will happen to people if you're successful is it's worth doing, and it's worth um, considering not going maximum full speed ahead, maybe finding out what full speed ahead looks like and then going a couple notches slower, just so that you don't accidentally, burn through the available energy in your community. All right. So for people who don't like being overwhelmed by charts with smallish print, I apologize. But I want to show you on this particular slide kind of an overview of not just the chapters of the guide, but a very rough schematic of what the landing page on our website is probably going to look like, but it's going to look less overwhelming than this and prettier. But what you can see here is that there are 21 different chapters or topics that are covered in this guide. And there are 5 different parts, if you will, 5 groupings of these topics. And the first ones are in black. They're foundational values, vision, and readiness. We spent time looking at starting in the upper left-hand corner. If you move one over, the second from the top left, we spent time learning about taking your inventory, right? Your context, your core competencies, and your calling, pulling together a small group of people interested in fundraising and doing these inventory taking exercises. And we looked at the next one over to the right. We looked at ways that you can make some decisions about who's going to be in charge of any additional fundraising activity that you decide to do. We only looked at one other topic in this part one, the ones that are visible in black, and that is storytelling, which is the second one down from the upper left. And we spent a whole evening on that. Part two of this guide has 8 different chapters, and these are really the guts of the practical part of the guide. Each one of these is a core practice that can be part of an overall fundraising strategy. Only a large-ish congregation among us with a high-functioning fundraising committee and a generous amount of staff, in my opinion, would be capable of doing all 8 of these and sustaining them. So the point of this is not to say that you should be doing all 8 of these. Rather, the point of this is that you should find one or more of these that really suits your congregation well. And then over time, if possible, build on what you're able to achieve. Right. And we looked at several of these. We looked at giving from retirement accounts. We looked at multi-purpose fundraising. And I think those were the two actually that we spent time on from this section. Part three in white, these are big efforts and initiatives that span more than a season or a single year. Um, right. And the one that we spent time on is major fundraising events, galas, and auctions. And I believe we also we may have spent time on endowments. Um, but again, it's like if you are trying to, if you already have one or more of the ones that are in white that happen on an annual basis or every couple of years, um, maybe you have a legacy gift program, and maybe you have an endowment. Um, then part of what this guide is hopefully going to be helpful with is um, assessing whether you are optimizing, getting the most out of what you're doing with those things. And if you are trying to start having one of these functions be a part of your fundraising strategy, the guide definitely can help you, um, you know, get started at, even on a very small scale. Part four is it's a shorter section, but it's important. Um, it is a collection of external resources. One of the chapters entirely has to do with the various online platforms that exist for fundraising and donor management, and offers basically some advice about figuring out which of those might be best suited for you. And laws and ethics regarding fundraising is actually the chapter I'm worried no one will ever bother to look at, but it's actually got some really important information in it. It covers topics that include things like the ethics of maintaining people's different types of financial information. It also includes what your obligations are if you have a website in terms of privacy and how you deal with information that people may share with you over that website. So there's a variety of things going on there. And then in blue, sticking out, um, the 21st chapter is actually the topic of this slideshow and our session tonight, and that is where do we start beginning your new fundraising journey. Now, back in December when we did session one, I showed you a different breakdown of all these chapters. And I wouldn't expect any of you to be tracking this, but tonight you are seeing 21 squares. And when we began, there were only 20. And I didn't use squares. But we've added a square, and that is because of you. When we started this course, I mentioned that one of the things I was hoping would happen would be that I would learn things from your feedback that would result in improving some of the components of the guide. And I apologize for not remembering who it was who uh, said this last time or even the time before that. But somebody offered feedback and said, there's kind of a gap here because you don't have anything about donor advised funds. And my response was, you're right. We don't have anything about that. Let me get to work on that. Well, I'm really happy to say that we now have a chapter called Giving from Donor Advised Funds. And I will happily send a PDF of the current draft of that with the email I send out after today's session. I'm not going to allow myself to get diverted into what those are all about, but I just want to say thank you. The other thing that is happening is feedback that I got from several of you on major fundraising events, specifically galas and auctions, was that the information itself about the various steps and components involved was really helpful, but that what was missing was a coherent and clear timeline or a recommended timeline with maybe some flexible ranges. Um, and I heard you. And so I actually have not sent you all a draft chapter of that section because I've kind of pulled it off the shelf and opened the hood and I'm going to spend several more hours with it because I want to go back to the learning materials that educated me about this. I want to make sure that I'm not just kind of rushing to get that out to you. I want the timeline aspect of it to make sense and to be consistent with great practices. Now I'm going to stop talking for a second, but I'm going to leave this on the screen before we dive into um, this chapter on where do you start. I want to I want to open it up to anyone who may have a question or a comment relating to how this all comes together or how, ways that you think it may be helpful or things that it might still need in order to be more helpful. And feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself if need be.
Jane, and I've got a question.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciated what you said about kind of the capacity to do the fundraising plan and making it manageable. I've got a related question in terms of basically the appetite of the congregation for fundraising. I've only been in the congregation, I'm at the end of 4 months. And I've now heard in the last week, even though I think we've had a pretty strong fundraising committee and a fair amount of success, I've now heard in the last week 2 or 3 people who have been with the congregation a long time, kind of taking pride in the fact that we don't talk about money, we don't do a lot of fundraising, and yet in a lot of ways I feel like as a congregation we're trying to move toward that, but I'm concerned about like the appetite for it itself. And just if there's any comments from you or anyone else who has more experience with congregations.
It's a great comment. And um, I mean, what you're talking about is your congregation's culture, right? And that you have this point of pride, which is that your congregation um, is not a place that seeks to support or embody a materialistic kind of um, culture, and not just materialistic, but I would probably throw in, um, having any kind of indicators of um, uh, wealth as a way of sort of flaunting status. Um, that this is really important. And then there's, underneath that, I mean, I can say this because I'm familiar with your congregation, and I spent 5 years in rabbinical school with your rabbi. So, um, you know, um, uh, being being a community that is deeply committed to economic justice, that's in the DNA of your congregation. Um, and so I think that what that means is that you just need to look for ways to raise money um, from people who end up coming to believe that they're giving money to support that kind of congregation. That by participating in whatever the fundraising efforts are that you're, um, putting in front of them as opportunities to play a role, that what they're hearing and understanding deeply is that this is one of the ways that they are strengthening Sha'arei Shamayim's capacity to be that kind of values-oriented, down-to-earth congregation that cares about economic justice. And I actually think a that's not a really that's not an impossible assignment, but it does mean that knowing what you stand for, what you're about, and being able to describe what it is that you will do with money you raise, that enacts those values, and being able to describe that as specifically as possible. To me, that all seems like it would be part of the storytelling assignment. And you're not alone, right? I mean, we have a lot of congregations in our movement that are allergic to some of the things that um, people in North American cultures habitually do with money and status, and with um, creating environments that are unintentionally exclusive. Um, so um, the storytelling and the specificity of what it is you're asking people to give to are ways that you can actually enable those values you share to be drivers of the funds that you raise. I see Scott.
Yeah, just want to tell Jane you're not alone. There are several people here from Congregation Beit Havrim in Atlanta. This is a congregation that for years and years and years has prided itself on the fact that we don't sell tickets, and we don't like, and so that creates a culture where we don't put a price tag on anything. But that also means that when we go to fundraise or to ask people for dues or to try to put a price tag on attendance at an individual event, it's fraught. I mean, there's a lot of hand wringing and a lot of, people are feeling like, oh my God, is this a betrayal of our values? But of course, not having the money to do any of this stuff would also be a betrayal of our values. And so we struggle with this. My colleagues on this call from Beta Havrim we're all kind of committed to trying to improve the culture so we can be comfortable in finding ways to talk about it, like what Rabbi Harris has said. But you're not alone. I think that's a Reconstructionist thing too, by the way. So there you go.
I so appreciate that you offered that support, and Scott, and it is a Reconstructionist thing. Um, and it's look, our movement has been countercultural since it was a group of people meeting up with Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan in a living room. Um, and um, it, when when it shifted from being a cohort of maybe 20 rabbis and another 20 or 30 interested lay people, um, in the 40s and 50s, by the time you push into the mid 60s, there are four congregations that are really excited about this, and several more that are kind of wanting to create a movement. And um, a lot of what defined those congregations were um, people who felt that they had kind of escaped from a kind of mink coat Judaism, to use a pejorative term that I am only semi-comfortable with, that they witnessed, in some, certainly not fair to say all, but that they witnessed in some Reform and conservative synagogues. And they just didn't square with the things their rabbis were saying. It didn't square with the Judaism they had learned about. And, so they succeeded in building a movement with a lot of congregations functioning on small budgets and a seminary also functioning on a small budget. And it persists to this day. So, here we are. Um, I will say that I'm not one of those people who, comes from the place of, well, we got to get over that. We got to get over this, kind of being allergic to uh, status and, being comfortable with fundraising. I don't think we have to get over it. We need to get over it enough so that we don't shut down. We need to get over it enough so that we don't sort of needlessly prevent ourselves from being able to create meaningful Jewish spaces and meaningful Jewish life um, for for ourselves and for our neighbors. Um, but the fact that we have this discomfort and that this tension is kind of a permanent feature, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think that the I think what the antidote to it being destructive for us is being able to talk about it very openly and with humor, with the widest range of members, with some candor and humor, not all the time, but some of the time, and also to remind people that of the kind of values that the organization they're being asked to support is all about. Jackie.
So I want to kind of bridge into what you're saying and build on what Scott said, because I'm also from Congregation Beth Haverim in Atlanta. And I think what I want to add is that we have had what I would call a stair-stepped journey. And we are trying at the moment to take sort of the next big stair step or get to the next platform. The
Yeah,
congregation started in 1985 by a group of gay and lesbian Jews. So
right.
you have both the I think about Judaism differently than your kind of parents or grandparents congregation, and the kind of I want to do things differently because I've always been treated differently, and I want to create a culture and an organization where everybody is welcome, belongs, and feels comfortable. And so for years, we didn't talk about money. And then things started to shift. Scott mentioned that we don't charge for high holiday services, and we bring in twice as much money as we ever did when we were charging for them. And they're
Love
open
it.
to anyone in the community. And I think that was 20 years ago and a huge step in that journey. We never had galas. Now we have something of, some major fundraising event every year. And, we're now kind of moving into the conversation about reconsidering our dues structure, which has been at least nominally a fair share dues structure. So the pieces are all linked, but I started to write you a text, and then when Scott started speaking, I thought, well, okay, I probably don't need to say this, but yeah, it's possible it takes a while, especially in a congregation that's very process oriented, which I think most recon congregations are.
Yes, yes, they are. And yep, it's definitely the case. Um, I appreciate you painting more of that picture, and I think stair stepping is a great image. And that's what I'm really hoping um, people in our congregations will be able to do with this guide, combined with, consult like talking with us. We have the bandwidth to talk with you about, you know, uh, what it is that you might be planning to add to your fundraising strategy in the coming year. Um, we can't talk about it every single week for an hour, but we can talk with you about it for a few hours and check in over a few months' time. Um, this is what we want to be able to do. All right, one more. Kelly, please jump in. And I apologize. I know there's folks in the chat who are chiming in, and I'm not quite adept enough to keep up with all of that, but I will do my best to make sure we get back to you as well. But Kelly, what do you got?
So actually, kind of follow up what you said, the bandwidth that you guys provide. Do you have the bandwidth to help maybe help us write letters or edit letters that we're going to send to the synagogue members to promote some of our fundraisers and get better buy-in? I have been doing fundraising for our synagogue for way too many years now, but one of the things I love doing is, I call them passive fundraisers, but they're not. They're fundraisers that are ongoing year-round, but they don't cost anything extra. So members don't have to pay extra out of their pocket, like buy wrapping paper at twice the price. It's a gift card program. The gift card program gives rebates back to the synagogue. So you spend 100, you get 100. OSE might earn 5%, 10%, whatever it might be.
Nice.
I'm struggling with buy-in. I do not have, after all these years, enough buy-in. We could easily raise $20,000 to $30,000 in this if every member or every family unit purchased $100 to $200 a month, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's your groceries, it's your gas, it's your hotels, it's your restaurants. Suggestions on how to get a great letter written so there's that buy-in and explaining it. And I think part of the problem, because I know it so well, I don't always explain it well. Like, it's easy in my head. How do you get buy-in?
So, okay, I'm hearing two questions. The first one was, if you reached out to your liaison, what would they say if you were like, listen, would you be willing to just look this letter over and uh, offer any feedback that you might have, or I'm specifically looking for feedback because I have this ongoing question, and I'm wondering what you see. We would totally do that.
Okay.
We would like, you know, we wouldn't draft the letter. We also wouldn't put in a prompt to Chat GPT and tell it to draft the letter for you. But although you might see what happens when you do that and then use it as a place to start, and you might find it delightful. I have no idea. But yes, we would. That's like something that people on our staff would love to do. And here's the thing, like, why? Not because we have endless amounts of time on our hands. The opposite. Sorry, not the opposite. Another reason aside from just wanting to help you is that that's actually a really interesting question. How is somebody in a leadership role expressing themselves, wording a particular kind of letter, if they feel like it's not working as well as they want it to, and they're wanting some suggestions, like, where am I drawing my suggestions from? And what happens when I find out 4 months later the degree to which it may have helped or not have helped? Like, it's just a chance to get better at this job. And it's okay that it's kind of a granular thing, because it's not insignificant. You're talking about communications. You're talking about fundraising communications. The second question you were asking about, like, how can we get more members to buy into this existing fundraising opportunity that we have that can actually be a win-win for everybody and doesn't really cost them anything. This would be the kind of thing that this is also the kind of thing that a liaison would want to, like, spend 10 minutes talking with you about and, like, sort of ask a few questions, like wanting to find out what kind of feedback, if any, you're getting. And then also helping you assess, like, okay, how much energy do I want to put into trying again? And at what point am I going to cut losses? And even if I don't ever fully understand why, just accept that for whatever reason, this is not catching on the way I had hoped it would. And none of those things are failures. Those are all, and there isn't a set answer to any of them. But we can be thought partners in helping you try to make those judgment calls.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. We should
Thank
move
you.
on. We should move forward. Yay. Okay. So how do you get started? Well, allow me to present a four-part, four-step process to getting started. And I'm going to ask for a little grace because the first three steps are kind of large steps. They're actually not simple things. They're things that require some time and energy. But the first one of these is simply to pull together a representative group of volunteers and staff. They can be the people who are your fundraising committee if you already have one. But if you don't have one, that's okay. They can be an ad hoc group. Even if you have a fundraising committee, it's a great idea to include more people. This is going to be, they're going to get together for a short burst of activity. So you want them to be fairly representative across different axes of diversity in your congregation. And what are they going to do? They're going to do stuff that we learned about way back in the very first session. They're going to do the inventory activities. They're going to be using a worksheet, a set of worksheets to go through what are our competencies in this synagogue? What's our context in a variety of different ways of looking at it? And what's our calling, right? What does it look like when we live into our values in a giving way, setting aside the need for fundraising for a moment and just figuring out what we're called to do morally, Jewishly, spiritually, right? So gather inventory, and then in this first step, assign some people to some roles for the next stretch of months or as much as a year. And by the way, we're going to go back over these in greater detail. This is an overview. So the second step is that this group is going to work together to come up with a one-year plan. All right. And what are they doing with this one-year plan? Well, let's say you already have fundraising activities that you do every year. Well, what this group is coming together to do is really to propose a plan that lasts a year that's going to be somewhat different than what you've been doing up to this point. In most cases, what it will involve is doing the same stuff that you usually do, plus something more. That's going to be the most common configuration. But it could be that this group actually comes together around a plan that involves doing less of something you've been doing over and over again, because you've all come to agree that it's not actually worth that much time and energy. And so really what you're coming up with is a one-year plan that is different. And maybe it also includes something new. And you're going to take that plan and you're going to map it out onto a calendar. And then you're going to do some research in this group. You're going to find out from others in your synagogue all the other important things that are happening that need to be on a layered calendar. And then you're going to bring this calendar that's got your new stuff added on top of all the other synagogue stuff that should be on a typical synagogue calendar. And this group is going to bring it to the board and say, what do you think? We'd like to do this over the course of, a year starting at such and such a time. What's your feedback? Right, so you've gathered a group. The group has done some homework together. And then they've come up with a proposal for a one-year plan. And let's imagine that the board, maybe after one round of back and forth, approves of this plan, and you know who's going to do what. Great. Then the third step is you get the people who are going to be responsible for enacting this plan to really work hard on the storytelling materials. Use the storytelling materials in the guide to come up with a core story that you're going to be relying on during that year and some variants that you're going to use for some of the different things that you're doing. And what I'm popping up on the screen right now for step 1, step 2, step 3 are the names of chapters that we actually covered earlier in this class that include instruction and accompanying worksheets that can be used to do these tasks. And then the 4th step is to get in touch with us and tell us what you're planning. Not because we need to check your homework, because it's good to do this in partnership. Like, we want to know. And when you describe what you're going to do and which parts of it you're excited about and worried about, what we're going to do is say, oh, this other congregation did one of those things a couple of years ago, and I was just talking with someone there about it. Can I make an introduction? Or we're going to say, we've learned this, this, and this. And, take it as you will. Like, it may or may not apply to your situation. But it's really worth it to kind of loop us in, even for a small piece of it. We'd love to be involved. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of break down a little bit more about step 1, right? So ideally, a really good way to do this is to have like an all-day mini retreat at somebody's home and to have food. And this doesn't have to be the final version of the people in your synagogue who are interested in doing some work on fundraising. As long as you've got a group there that is impressively representative to the best of your ability of folks in your congregation, they're going to have fun. And what they're going to do during this all-day thing is they're going to do those core competency assessments, and they're going to do this mapping of your context internally and in your local community, and in terms of who your leadership is and who your lay members are and what subgroups you haven't thought about that actually exist. They're going to do all of that. They're going to have this really interesting and clarifying experience that allows them to then pivot to thinking about fundraising activities in light of who you are and what you can be, and what your values and identity is all about. Right? And as this group works together through that mini retreat, one of the other things they want to do is confirm some leadership roles. So maybe they're establishing for the first time ever a fundraising committee, or maybe the fundraising committee is really the host of this thing, but there's a few more people who've come. And by confirming leadership roles, what I mean is you're thinking, you're already coming to some initial agreement about maybe 1 or 2 things that you want to try, and you're finding out who it is who's going to be willing to play some key roles to make that happen. You don't need to have it all mapped out down to the final detail. You're just making progress. All right. So that's really what step 1 is all about. And then as you pivot to step 2, which is where you're going to be trying to create a 1-year plan, part of what you're going to be doing with this step is taking those big ideas that emerged during that 1-day mini retreat and starting to really talk together about, like, which of these things might we actually want to implement. Are we going to keep doing the same stuff we've done in recent years and add on? Are we going to change? Do we think we should change what we've done in recent years? If so, do we have the authority to make those changes, or do we need to talk about it with some other people in the congregation or with the board? And we also, in this step 2, you also want to have overt conversations to try to guess at what your total bandwidth is. And I really like this definition of bandwidth. Bandwidth is the total time, energy, sacrifice, and love available among your clergy, staff, and your volunteers for fundraising. Right. And so, again, what I'm advising is that this group that takes this bold step of finding out all the layers that need to go into this calendar and then figuring out where fundraising fits on top of that, that they should also be making an educated guess, or maybe it's a bit of a wild guess about the bandwidth that you have available to do this, and then aim for something that doesn't gobble all of it up. It's okay if you're going to gobble most of it up, but not all of it, right? And then after you've shared this with your board and whatever back and forth happens leads to your board giving a green light for whoever it is that's going to be in charge of this. And we can go back to the chapter called Who's in Charge of Fundraising. That's one of the chapters that I'm recommending that gets used, and it's in this chapter 21, about getting started. That one sends this group back to those early chapters and those worksheets. But after all that's done, right, and the plan is going to be implemented, and you know when that year is going to start, then everybody involved should huddle together and do some learning together about storytelling and start having fun crafting some stories that you're going to want to use. And that can include, by the way, gathering anecdotes and testimonials from members, and beginning to craft them in the ways that we have learned about. Right. And then here's part 4 again. Tell us what's going on. We'd love to talk it over with you. See if we can be helpful, or if you can be helpful to others through us. All right. The guts of this plan are all in step 2. I mean, maybe step 1 as well. But step 1 is kind of about pulling together a cohort of people that are interesting and diverse to have like a mini retreat at somebody's house, and to, kind of get the ball rolling on this. Step 2 is where you're trying to do the hard work of coming up with a 1-year plan. And I can say more later about why I'm very into the 1-year plan. But now I'm going to abruptly switch metaphors on you. And I'm going to say that the people who've gathered together to do this work of coming up with a 1-year plan, I'm going to use this drive-through fast food, bad nutrition metaphor for one way to think about how much to take on. So I'm going to suggest that you could decide to take on just a snack pack, just like we're going to just do 2 things that are new in this new year, and they might not even be very big, right? So you can do this all in the service of just doing something that is a modest addition to your regularly occurring fundraising activities. Right? You can do a combo meal, which is like one major event, and maybe we get started on one long-term project, like finally launching our effort to solicit members who are over 70 to make donations from their annual distribution from their retirement account. So that's going to last for more than a year. That's going to be like an ongoing thing. So one major event, one ongoing longer term thing, and then 2 small things. And we're going to do that, right? And then you can read for yourself, like if you're feeling like you've got a lot of bandwidth and ambition and people, and you want to do a family meal bundle, you can do that. I'm just offering these up as metaphors. Now I'm going to offer like some concrete examples from like an imaginary synagogue. So this imaginary synagogue is called Temple Ahava, the Temple of Love. That kind of sounds like, I don't know, Roman or whatever. And at Temple Ahava, the version 1 of Temple Ahava is 45 households. Um, and they, no, they're bigger than that. They're about 80 households. And they've decided they're doing a snack pack. They just want to do two things. And they want to do them over the course of a year. But the two things that they picked are not like two little tiny pieces of candy. They're like actually like two like nourishing, significant items, right? So in this case, they've decided that they want to do, for the first time, they want to do a spring concert, and they have a stage, they have a bima that also, that used to in fact be a stage. So they've never done this before, but they are well suited to it with in-house skill sets and talent. And so this group makes an estimate of how many lead volunteers they need and how many volunteers they're going to need, let's say during the last few weeks before this happens, and they make a decent guess about what kind of staff time is going to be needed, and they can plot this out. Working backwards from the event itself, and figure out what needs to go on a calendar to actually pull this off. And then the other thing that they want to do during the course of that year is they're giving themselves the whole year to do it. But by the end of that year, they want to have their retirement account giving campaign that is sort of an ongoing campaign up and running. They want to have their 2-point people. They want to have talked with their administrator about how they use their donor management software to make sure they're able to be prepared for tracking these kinds of donations as they come in. They want to get their website landing page organized, and they're doing the same kind of thing. They're mapping out on a calendar what it will take to do this and who needs to do what. And then once they've got their proposal ready to bring to the board, and they've also got this calendar that includes as many things as they can think of that are ordinary synagogue business, then they have something they can hand over that's very concrete and that the board can respond to. And hopefully they'll get to yes, and then they'll do their best to implement. And if they have some things go sideways along the way, they'll course correct and they'll learn. And all of this is good. I want to show you another example. I'm not going to narrate as much as I just did on that first one because it will just take too long. But you can see what's on the screen. The same idea. This might be for a synagogue that is more in the like 150 household kind of range, and that maybe has not a lot going on fundraising wise, but is ready for a kind of renewed energy. So this may look like an ambitious set of things to take on, but it's not being layered on top of an already ambitious set of regular activities. And really, when you look at this thing, it's got two small fundraising projects that are basically like multi-purpose fundraising events. And I want to start with those because I just think it's helpful to stimulate our minds about the kinds of in-house skills and talents that could be amenable to an event that also raises a modest amount of money for your synagogue, right? Like if you have a plumber who loves your synagogue, actually the synagogue I used to serve has a fantastic plumber who loves the synagogue a lot. If that plumber is willing to do a DIY event where they show people like 4 different really simple plumbing fixes that could save people a lot of time and money, and that plumber doesn't like getting called to do anyway, because it's not really worth their time. This is something people will come to, and if it turns out that there's a little bit of humor, and it's a fundraiser for something very specific, that, maybe it's even a fundraiser for something that needs to get fixed in the synagogue physically, then you've got something, right? And then the other one is like taking an old idea, having a bake sale around Purim, but figuring out a way to connect it to a cohort of 2 grades in the religious school that maybe have larger than average set of students in a particular cycle. And again, just want to stimulate the idea that whatever it is that's happening in your synagogue where there's already energy coming together, like it turns out that over the next couple of years, we've got this larger than average 7th grade and then year after B'nai Mitzvah class. And we don't know if that's going to happen again for 20 years, but it just is happening now. And that means there's already this gravitational force that's pulling together those kids, those teachers, and those parents to do some stuff that they wouldn't otherwise be doing. Well, leverage that, right? Like have somebody ask, what could that lead to that might allow us to have a fundraiser that will meet some of the criteria they already need to meet to do what they already need to do for their other tasks. Like this is a really good way to create efficiency around use of energy, but it also creates this like virtuous set of like unexpected capacities, right? So it's like suddenly your 7th and 8th graders who were going to come together to do some things anyway, are now coming together to do something that involves baking and food, which if it turns out that's also linked to what some adults in your congregation love to do and are good at, now you've kind of got a bunch of stuff that's all building community and turns out to be, some kind of modest fundraiser for some purpose that you have. And as you look further up, legacy giving, I'm not going to unpack that, but this is the kind of thing where, you're looking beyond just a single year. And we have a whole chapter that helps you identify how to do that. And your major project there, maybe it's one that this synagogue already does every year, or maybe it's maybe the synagogue just did some part of it and is trying to enlarge it. Okay, another example. I'm actually not going to read any of these out loud. I'm going to just let you have the screen in front of you, and I'm going to say nothing for 30 seconds. So, okay, right? Probably this is one of our bigger synagogues. Maybe it's a 400 household congregation. Maybe a couple of these things already happen, like the High Holidays annual appeal. Maybe you've already got the point people for the legacy giving campaign. It's just a question of a few more steps, right? But the main idea here is the activity that people in step 2 are engaged in is hopefully enjoyable, but it's also serious. And what they're looking to do is plot out in a chart like this, if that's what works for you, or in some other way, what you want to attempt. And I'm choosing examples of activities that all have instructional material in this guide. You may or may not need that material. You may already have people who know how to do some of these things, or you may already. I wanted to include at least one that included annual report because we didn't, I don't think we covered that. And It's one of those that's a little bit stealthy, but if you're any congregation, no matter how small, that's able to pull together an annual report that includes terrific photos of your members doing different things, and that has a few key statistics, not a ton, but like 3 or 4 that reflect well on how you're meeting your mission. You don't have to hide something that's not going well in an annual report. It's also there to be honest, like, we had this fundraising goal of X and we only raised half of X. And we welcome your ideas about how we might improve on that next year. That's fine too. Right. But so it's this thing that it's this document that ends up serving multiple purposes that's really terrific for your community. And if I'm embarrassing myself because we did cover it, this is like middle-aged dad brain at 9 p.m. on, a night where after shoveling a ton of snow. So, all right. Again, I wanted to just say a word about this calendaring as as the key means of this group working on fundraising, communicating with your board. I love this way of communicating with the board, because what this group is actually going to, in many cases, end up doing is they're actually going to help the board. They're going to help the board do their own general plotting of the entire year that's being covered. Because, and I'm not saying our boards don't bother to like ever try to calendar things. I'm saying boards have a lot of stuff going on, and it's just hard to keep track of everything. And so having a committee or an ad hoc group take the time to, as what's just come up on the screen, like ask your staff, whatever administrative staff you have, to give them their calendar that includes important administrative deadlines, and to begin with the bottom layer of this calendar and put in all the Shabbats and the holidays and when you meet and how you meet, right? And then to layer in, oops, sorry about that, to layer in recurring school events, layer in recurring communications. What do I mean by that? Like a newsletter, right? Like major communications that happen at a set time throughout the year, and when the deadlines are for that, layering in known life cycle events that are going to happen, that are big deals in your community, right? And then finally, in the top layer, you're integrating your existing fundraising activities and then adding in whatever new ones that you might be doing. And by bringing all of that together in this prepared, like holistic calendar of what we do to your board, you invite the board to make any corrections or additions. So it's an opportunity for them to help you not plan a fundraising activity that it turns out to be ill-timed. Right? But you're also kind of training the board to think about this year-long experiment, if you will, that you're trying to enact, this year-long plan. And once you are ready to give this to the board, before you do, part of what I advise is that this group actually stop and say, are we trying to do too much? Even if you don't think you are. Ask anyway, and just bat it around, or try to imagine together things that might result in it being too much, but that you haven't maybe fully realized are going to be too much. Like, for example, okay, we think this is all good, but what if it just turns out that we are grossly underestimating staff time for all of it? What if we're just not good at estimating that, and we don't even realize that how bad we are at that, right? So just like taking that opportunity to think about that, because one of the things that the board, if they're doing their duty, is going to also be thinking about is this too much for us, even if they're not the ones who have to do it? Like, is it too much for us to keep track of you guys doing it? Is it too much for us to have to deal with any of it that maybe goes wrong? Right? So they're worried about that. And that makes sense that they're worried about it. But if you've already had an additional round of discussion about ways in which it might be too much, you will probably already have some thoughtful answers to some of the things that they might worry about. Right? So the goal of step 2 is to end up with a calendar and a plan to give to the board for their review and approval. And it's okay if there's some back and forth before you finally end up with the actual plan. So now I'm actually going to open this up once again, and I'm going to ask if Sherry could help me with whatever might be in the chat. Moving forward with purpose and joy is the whole point. The more fun this stuff is, the more reason for all of us coming together in, in joyful community and Jewish community, and making magic happen together. I mean, that's why we're doing this. And begin the journey, but try not to take hold of too much all at once. I'm going to put this back up in case it's helpful. And then after a minute or two, I'll pull it down so we can see each other's faces. But
a lot of comments and questions came in the chat.
Super.
To do with what you said at some point. I would just suggest inviting people to unmute and share or ask.
Thanks, Sherry. All right. Scott, is it okay if I call on Chaim first, since we haven't heard from him yet? Hey, Chaim.
Hi, I think I'm unrelated, but recently in my community, I know of a Christian community where their long-term minister is leaving, and the two parts of the community are going to war.
Oh, no.
So they're fighting in terms of that. And I understand that that's a common phenomena, that the rabbi leaves and the community has a problem. So I'm asking for a different educational thing that might cover that.
Got it. That is like, are you saying you would like it if Thriving Communities did something around like the opportunities and perils of rabbinic transitions?
There are thinking long-term in communities. Rabbi Lori's going to be around. She just signed another 5-year contract, but then she'll be getting older and she'll leave. And then, oh, shoot, what's going to happen to our community? We're going along really nicely, but when she leaves, I see this other community, they lost their beloved minister.
Yeah.
And they're like going to war. So
it happens sometimes.
Yes. So some training about something like that in the future, not in this context, would be really appreciated.
Totally. Duly noted. I was going to be stunned if the question that you were bringing was, how can that church fundraise off of this devastating internal split they're having? Because the answer is, I don't know. But of course, that was not your question. Scott.
I love that question, though. I thought that was asking for a friend. The point I wanted to make, and I think I think this was implied, Rabbi, in what you were saying, but in case it wasn't, I just want to put this out there because my background is I'm a marketing and communications person. When you layer these calendars and you layer the services you're doing and the programming you're doing and the fundraising you're intending to do and the comms that are regularly scheduled and everything, I really think, because I've seen it with our synagogue, I've had to really be pretty energetic about getting people to understand how you orchestrate communications around all these things, because we know there are all these different layers, but our members or our prospective members don't see it that way. They just see this fire hose of stuff coming from us.
Yes.
And so trying to connect the dots for them, even in terms of when you are planning when you drop communications about various fundraising things. You have to
Yes.
think really carefully about how it ties to other things you're doing, the themes of the season, the ways you want your spiritual leadership involved, the way you want your board to talk about it. It's if you were doing this at a business, you just have to think about how the whole thing works together, not just that it has many layers to the like it's a spreadsheet with, oh, this drops
Right.
this. You have to really think about how it ties together.
I'm really glad you said that, and I'm realizing I forgot to provide, I forgot to say one of the reasons for doing, for the fundraising cohort of people doing it this way. Um, it often has a sobering effect on that group, because it makes them suddenly start seeing that there's already a bunch of stuff happening, that they have to kind of figure out a way to either fit in between, um, or create some kind of positive connection with. And so one of the nice results, I think, of doing that is it already starts to mitigate towards not trying to do too much. Um, and it sets up um, useful conversations about useful concerns rather than ones that might just be more grounded in the peculiarities of different board members' anxieties. Um, right. So it's like useful for people on the board to say, okay, but we're doing this tribute for so and so who's been with us for 30 years. Um, and that thing can't be a fundraiser. And you're trying to you're going to need to do a bunch of communicating, you know, um, for 6 weeks before this thing. And it's going to clash because you're going to your stuff's going to get lost because there's going to be so much other stuff going out. Right. So this is a helpful objection or concern. And it's getting everybody to sort of figure out what they can do together and then um, how they can avoid some of the problems of, sending out too many messages or having messages that are too long and include too many items. So, yeah, no easy fix. Diana.
Hi. Well, we're having an interesting conversation in the chat about fundraising around a rabbi's retirement or a new hire. Or I'm also thinking like maybe we missed an opportunity because we just hired a new director of congregational learning. It could have been a good way to, let's make sure they have all the resources they need or something. And so, I was gonna, people have done some great things, but I'd love to see some like models of wording because I certainly don't want it to seem crass, that we're just, you know,
Yeah,
goodbye. Oh, great, we can make money off this, when,
right,
you know,
right. So, I mean, of course, it won't, you're not going to do something that seems crass because you'd look at it and you'd be like, oh, no, we just cannot send this out. And other people would too. Right. And one of the nice automatic filters that you sometimes get if part of what you're trying to do is honor someone at a point of life or career transition. Um, if it's a loving goodbye or a loving transition from, maybe not goodbye, but it's a transition into retirement.
yeah.
Um, um, you know, they're going to have to be comfortable with whatever the plan is, to include a fundraising component because they don't want to feel embarrassed, or ill at ease with whatever it is that the congregation would want to do, and that's already a limiting factor, um, and that's helpful, and um, yeah, I mean, I would say this is a great liaison conversation because you totally don't want to miss opportunities. Um, and you can feel when there's enough weight to whatever it is that's happening, that it might make sense to people that this is a reason to raise some money for the community's goals. So it's not going to always feel that way, right? Like, I don't know if the hiring of the new director of congregational learning would land that way for enough people or not. Maybe it would. I don't know. It really comes down to like things that are specific to your congregation, and the way that people in the community were maybe anticipating or thinking about that particular hire. But you can also, if part of what you're wondering about is hiring around an individual's excellence, that doesn't only that sometimes that doesn't become apparent until they've been working for the congregation for a couple of years. And then there can be an opportunity to fundraise around like what they want, what you all want to do that they could potentially do if the congregation had money for X. So there's, and where that person's renowned excellence is one of the compelling reasons why people are going to be like, oh yeah, if we raise that money for that, so and so is totally going to like, make that work really, really well because we see how great they are. Let me move on to Jackie. No, to Rebecca, because Jackie, you got a chance earlier. So Rebecca.
Sorry, I was late. We were having a board meeting, so I hopped in when our board meeting was moved on Zoom, so it was much easier transition this evening. But in the chat, I mentioned we celebrated the retirement of our congregation's long-term rabbi of 35 years 2 years ago, and it
Yep.
was kind of a 2 year celebratory process. We raised money in a legacy fund, and then we also created a festschrift, a book from other rabbis and cantors. So I just wanted to show everyone the book.
Ooh, awesome. I love that. Let me see if I can. Thank you. You did it. Thank you, Sherry. You spotlit it. That's beautiful.
And then with the book, there was a live event that people could buy tickets to,
Mm,
where the cantors that created music, because it was a rabbi and a cantor retiring after 35 years together on the
yep.
pulpit. Um, we um we also had like a sing along that people could join in and like sing with the cantors that came to sing with us.
I've it sort of seems like you can't entirely contain a smile around about all of this. What?
It was fun.
Okay, yeah, it was fun. That's awesome.
And we had like light hors d'oeuvres, like what you talked about 2 weeks ago, like figuring out what the right food was for the event, and everybody in it was a big turnout.
That's amazing. I'm really happy for you. Do you happen to remember who came up with the idea of the Festschrift?
Yes, it's
That's a fun word.
we uh we thanked them someplace. Oh, I think it was we had a group, we had like an editorial team, and then we had a team for the concert, a design and program committee, an event and food committee, a marketing advisor, a video producer, and then we had somebody who actually Jay's husband drew the pictures of the rabbi and cantor.
Okay, that is awesome. Um, so I love this idea of uh, a collection of writing because that is not a collection of um, yearbook way to goes. We loved you. This is like writing about Judaism meaning life,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
In honor of the two of them.
correct.
So, and were the contributors largely members or were they?
No, the contributors were mostly rabbis and cantors that had studied or been taught by.
I love it. Okay, so connecting to the congregation's part of the congregation's story is the impact and legacy of this cantor and rabbi, and so you ended up with this sort of serious piece like collection of religious writing. Um, and you also have this community participation celebration.
Yeah.
I love it. And how many, you guys are kind of on the bigger side for us, right? Like,
Yeah, I think we were at 370 something families.
I think when we did the event a year ago, we were a little bit higher.
Bigger. I think we were over 400.
Yeah.
got it. Got it. Okay. This is great stuff. Jackie.
So I wanted to share, I wrote in the chat about, we had a retirement event. This happened during COVID. And our rabbi retired, and given his in I don't know, deep focus on social justice, we decided to do an event honoring him. It was actually skits on Zoom. It was fabulous. I don't remember if we charged for it or not, probably not. But the real thing I want to say is that we raised funds to create a restricted fund for social justice in his honor.
Yes.
And also, there was a chunk that was going to the budget. I think it was 25 for the budget, and then everything over that went into the fund. But what I want to say is, I didn't have anything to do with structuring it, but I'm wondering whether if we structured it more like every dollar covered some of both, it gets past the we're taking advantage of this situation to raise money for the synagogue. And we now have a really nice fund, restricted fund, for doing social justice work and tikkun olam. In fact, so much so that we are challenged to spend all of it. And we've been able to use some of it to fund activities, tikkun olam activities that have brought congregants together, as well as doing good in the world.
That's fantastic. Just the thought that is stimulating for me is that the more that you do in the world, that your members do in the world, because of that fund, the more stories you have to tell. And the stories can also, and the stories, there can be multiple stories, right, for any one project or initiative. And, there can be a first person account from a member who's never participated in a Tikkun Olam project before with a synagogue. And, if you think about things like not just the topic that's the obvious one, which is Tikkun Olam, but think about topics that also relate to stories that you want to be able to tell. So you want to be able to tell for people to learn stories about new members having a positive experience. So you can kind of go hunting for stories related to whatever Tikkun Olam event just happened, to see if any of them fit that criteria. And you could make your own list of the kinds of stories that you're looking for and ways that you can use those stories in communications or as part of a later fundraising pitch. Like if you have an annual High Holidays campaign, some of those stories can be impact stories about why supporting the synagogue in general makes a real difference in people's lives. So that's where my mind went, was whatever it is that you're doing that feels like a natural occasion for doing a particular kind of fundraising. Try to harvest as many different types of stories as you can from those initiatives or events, and do what you need to do to get permission to be able to use them as impact stories and testimonials for other fundraising campaigns that you do. other questions or comments or suggestions in our last couple of minutes here? Stephanie.
Hey, I just wanted to offer that, Ner Shalom did a big dues campaign last year, and we have a packet where we had like a really successful dues letter and written by one of our congregants who has a background in development. And part of that was like, we included like rabbi salary increase and director of education salary increase. Like, so just the letter is a great example of how to incorporate asks and for very specific things in strategic and sensitive ways. And the dues campaign also included like the use of the self-assessment questionnaire that we send to everybody. That's actually, or Shalom was really generous in sharing their structure and their process with us. And so if that would be helpful to people, we could share that as well.
I was just looking at yours and theirs last week, and I'm trying to remember how it came up. But yeah, if you have a link that you could send me, I'll include it in my follow-up email.
Sure, I can make that happen.
I think this is I realize we didn't actually specifically talk about dues, and that's partly because dues is lumped in with the resource that we're trying to build for next year on membership. But nevertheless, the self-assessment tool that your congregations use, and I know we have other congregations that do this too. I think Mishkan Shalom does it in Philly, and I think Kadima does it. Oh, thank you, Sherry. I think Kadima does it in Seattle. Check it out if you haven't ever seen one of these. You might find it exciting. Glenn, you get the last word.
Yeah, so it's actually on the note of what Stephanie just graciously offered to share. Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a mechanism that we could set up so that we don't all have to recreate the same wheel? Like a lot of us, like we're 80 people. We don't, 80 films. We don't have an executive director. We barely have an office staff, and so if there's different kind of campaigns which are work, and as I wrote in the chat, even just programming, for things that we could share with each other, so that if there's 16 of us here, we've got and if we each did one, it just opens up a lot of more possibility, or at least gives us more ideas to pull from and say, I like that, but maybe what's the little twist that we want to put on it? So I don't know if there's, some place where we can put all this information together. Like if we had a Slack channel, that would be great, or things, something like that. But I just want to throw that out there. I think it would be fabulous for us. And anyways, that's it.
So that's a weighty and really excellent question to end on, and it's practical. I want to bring that question to my supervisor because I think it's a really good question. And the first thought that's coming to mind is that I'm going to give some thought to what I can include in my follow-up email to this last session to everybody, because it might even be possible just for people to indicate if there are a couple of different types of fundraising activities that they might be up for collaborating on, or sort of co-creating, and then taking to their own community, co-creating the essential version of it, and then adding whatever specificity they need for their own local situation. Whatever it is that might actually be a way for people to save on some of the work and benefit from each other's collaboration. I want to do what I can to see if we can manifest that, because I see it as a potential next step or a follow-on. What I can't do is promise what that might look like at this moment, but I can promise to bring it to my supervisor and to our team. Oh gosh, it's 9:33. All right, Kelly, what do you got?
I was just gonna say, I love the idea, but also just, I think for fundraising and all these things, when you see something you like when you're out and about, something fun, just maybe ask that group or that idea to see if it's something you can bring in. I went to a piano night, a dueling piano night one time. Never thought much about it. They do fundraising. We brought them in. Like, so I think sometimes just when you're out and about and something grabs your attention, reach out and go, hey, is there a way to make this a fundraising thing? But I
Totally.
love this idea of a communication. So that's all.
I love it. And I'm happy that we're ending on the subject of dueling pianos because it seems random and lovely. But I want to thank all of you for being a part of this class, and I look forward to your feedback. And I don't hesitate to get in touch. It's even if I'm not your congregation's liaison, I'm really happy to field a fundraising question and to work with your liaison and loop them in. So wish everybody strength and blessings as we try to make our way through really challenging times together, and so appreciate this time that we've been able to spend together these past couple months. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.